Welcome to Evidence Mastery. Today, we're diving deep into the core concepts of real-world data, and we're getting our insights straight from the source. Chapter 2 of the fantastic guide, Real-World Evidence, Principles and Practice. This gives us a really solid, expert-backed foundation for our whole conversation.
So, what's on the agenda for this explainer? We're going to start with the basics of RWD, then get into the really important distinction between primary and secondary data. After that, we'll take a tour of the most common data sources, everything from your doctor's records to the data coming off your smartwatch. We'll also see how it all gets connected, and of course, finish up with the key takeaways you need to remember.
All right, so why all the fuss? Why are we dedicating so much time to this? Well, it's pretty simple. Without real-world data, there is no real-world evidence. Period. RWD is the foundation. It's the raw material. You get the idea. It's that important.
You know the old saying, garbage in, garbage out? It has never been more true than it is right here. If you're starting with flawed, messy, or incomplete data, you're just going to end up with flawed results. It doesn't matter how sophisticated your analysis is. A wobbly foundation means a wobbly house, and bad data means bad evidence.
So what is the official definition we're working with? Well, regulatory bodies like the FDA describe RWD as data on a patient's health and how healthcare is delivered, which is routinely collected from a whole bunch of different sources. And, it's a pretty broad definition, and that's intentional. The world of RWD is always growing as our technology gets better and better.
Okay, now not all RWD is created equal. The very first, and probably the most critical distinction we have to make is between primary and secondary data. Really understanding this difference is the key to everything else we're going to talk about.
So here's the deal. Primary data is collected with a specific research question in mind, right from the very beginning. Secondary data, on the other hand, was collected for a totally different reason, like taking care of patients or for insurance billing, and we later decide to repurpose it for research. This distinction is so important because the original purpose dramatically impacts the data's quality, what information is in there, and, crucially, what information is missing.
And this brings us to what might be the single most important principle in this entire field. There is no such thing as good data or bad data in a vacuum. It all, and I mean all, comes down to one thing: fitness for purpose. Are you trying to track how many people are hospitalized across an entire country? Then that massive claims data is probably your best bet. Are you trying to understand the tiny nuances of a really rare disease? You're going to need a highly specialized registry for that. It's about using the right tool for the right job.
Okay, so we know what it is and why it matters, but where does all this data actually come from? Let's take a quick tour of the main sources of RWD.
This gives us a great bird's-eye view of the landscape. You've got electronic health records, claims data, registries, patient-reported outcomes, the list goes on. And think of it this way. Each one has its own unique superpowers and its own kryptonite. Let's start with the big one, EHRs.
Right, electronic health records, or EHRs, are basically the digital version of a patient's chart. Their biggest strength is their clinical depth. You get lab results, vital signs, even the notes doctors write. The challenge? Well, that data can be messy. It can be inconsistent and fragmented across totally different healthcare systems, making it hard to see the full picture.
Next up, we have claims data. This stuff is generated for insurance and billing purposes, and its power is its incredible scale. We are talking millions and millions of patients, often over many years. But there's a trade-off. It lacks a lot of the clinical detail. The data tells you a procedure happened, but it doesn't tell you why it happened or how sick the patient actually was.
Now, registries are kind of like the special forces of the RWD world. They are custom-built to collect very specific, high-quality data for a particular purpose, like tracking the long-term safety of a new drug or medical device. The data you get from them is usually top-notch, but they're not always a perfect reflection of the general population.
So beyond these more traditional sources, we are now entering a really exciting new era of RWD, and it's being driven by the digital devices we use every single day.
Yep, your smartwatch, your fitness tracker, even the health apps on your phone. They are all generating this constant stream of RWD. This data gives us an amazing glimpse into what's happening in a person's life between their doctor's visits. But there's a catch. Is the heart rate data from your fitness tracker really accurate enough for clinical research? And are the people who use these devices a good representation of everyone? These are the big questions we're all grappling with right now.
So we have all of these different really powerful data sources. But the real magic, the real breakthrough happens when we start bringing them together. This is the fundamental challenge, isn't it?
A single patient's data lives in their doctor's EHR, their insurance company's claims database, and maybe even on their smartwatch. So how on earth do you combine all those pieces to get one single, holistic view of their health?
Well, the answer is data linkage. It's the process of connecting the dots between all these different data sets. We can link a patient's clinical records with their insurance claims, and even link that to data from a wearable device. And this is crucial, we can do it all while rigorously protecting their privacy, using techniques like tokenization. This is how we get that true 360-degree view of the patient's health journey.
Okay, wow, we have covered a lot of ground. So let's take a minute and distill all of this down to the most important takeaways that you can actually use in your work.
So what's the bottom line here? It's that there's no silver bullet, no single perfect data source that solves every problem. The real key is to be a smart consumer of data, to really understand the strengths and weaknesses of each source, and to know how to strategically combine them to get the rigorous answers you're looking for.
If you remember nothing else from our time today, please remember these 3 principles. First, fitness for purpose. Always match the data to the question you're asking. Second, data quality assessment. Know the pros and the cons of your chosen source inside and out. And third, ethical stewardship. This means always prioritizing patient privacy and having transparent governance. These are the absolute pillars of good science in our field.
We have really only scratched the surface of this incredibly fascinating and fast-moving topic. If you want to dive deeper, I honestly can't recommend the book that inspired this explainer enough, Real-World Evidence, Principles and Practice. You can find it on Amazon.com. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey into the world of real-world data.